In the beginning, I just started surfing in school holidays and self-taught. Back in my day, there was no such thing as surf schools or teachers. I finished my apprenticeship as a pattern maker, and a week later I handed my notice in. And everybody blew up. The boss was freaking out and my parents were freaking out, and they didn't talk to me for about 5 years until I started my own business. I was a surf bum like everybody else. I first started making surfboards in 1962 at Lakemba in Sydney, and the company was called Ron's Surfboards. And I went there expecting to get a job as a shaper, but they didn't have any vacancies for shapers, so I got a job as a finish coater. And that was just putting a coat of resin over the finished board. And then 3 months later, a shaper left or something and I got the job. I used to surf Narrabeen, North Narrabeen. At that stage I was shaping for Barry Bennett, and everybody was riding a Bennett surfboard that I shaped. Ray Richards, Mark Richards' father, he used to come to Sydney every week in this old panel van, and he'd put 22 surfboards in it and on it and go back up to Newcastle. He'd come down every week and do it, and I was sort of attracted to him, and one day I started talking to him.
It was a family surf shop which was originally called Ray Richards Proprietary Limited, which morphed into Richards Surf Shop. And my dad never actually made surfboards. He always bought surfboards made by other manufacturers, and at the time Brookvale in Sydney was the epicentre of surfboard building in Australia, sort of followed very closely by the Gold Coast area, and originally started buying boards from Barry Bennett and Gordon Woods.
Out of the blue, he asked me could I make Mark a board. Mark was 9 at the time, so I made a board for Mark, and that really started a good long relationship.
My dad and my mum and myself, became very sort of tight with the McCoy family, and we spent a lot of time with them on trips up to the North Coast and also to Sydney.
We were up at Crescent Heads at a team's title, and I was with Narrabeen, and he was laying on the bank halfway out to the point, and I'm like, I wonder if I should ask him, I wonder if I should ask him. And so I built up enough courage to walk up, and I said, "G'day Ray, how you going?" He said, "Yeah, good son, good. What's going on?" I said, "I just wanted to ask you something." "Yeah, go ahead mate, go ahead." I said, I'm thinking of starting my own business, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it." And he looked up at me and he said, "I'll take the first 10.
Geoff was on the cutting edge of building like high performance surfboards.
I used to work 18-hour days, shape 4 boards, and then I'd go back after dinner of a night and gloss coat the whole lot of them. There'd be about 8 each day, and I'd work until like 11 o'clock at night doing that. Bounce out of bed in the morning, go straight in, shape 4 boards, and by 10 or 11 o'clock in the day I was up Narrabeen getting surf. It was pretty full on. I couldn't imagine doing it now.
My interest in surfboard design and surfboard manufacturing and working in the surfboard industry was completely inspired by Geoff and all the guys who worked in his factory.
Geoff McCoy is one of the greatest surfboard shapers in Australian history, with a rich heritage, spending many years in North Narrabeen and then moving on to Avoca, and did an apprenticeship as a pattern maker, which I think gave him that precision of craft.
And they also paved the way for other surfers and shapers to follow in their footsteps, inspired by what they were achieving. Everyone thinks the barrel is the ultimate thing of surfing, but try shaping your own board, crafting it with your own bare hands, and then riding that barrel. Unbelievable.
I've never linked the two. My sister tells me regularly that you're just so lucky you had it, because pattern making, you had to be within the tolerance in wood was nothing more than a 64th of an inch. So you had to get it really spot on. And she reckons that's what helps me with shaping.
Geoff was the major inspiration for me wanting to make surfboards, because they had a work ethic that I'd never seen before. Like at the time I was going to school, I'd seen my parents working 9 to 5, 6 days a week, and I figured that was pretty much what everyone did for work. You got to surf before work and after work, but the whole philosophy of the factory was that if someone came in and said Narrabeen was firing, no internet in those days, so it was all word of mouth and being able to read weather maps. Everyone in the factory would basically down tools and go surfing for a couple of hours, and then make up the time later in the day, or that evening, or the next morning. So it seemed like a very enviable lifestyle.
Well, I didn't know he was a legend. He was just my big brother. It was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. It was exciting. And most of all, I just grew up thinking that I could do whatever I wanted to do because my brother did whatever he could do well.
It was at a time in the early 80s that the McCoy brand was prevalent. You'd mentioned Quicksilver, McCoy, Billabong, Rip Curl, they were all mentioned in the same breath, and it was an exciting time when surfing came out of a sort of a laid-back start and then evolved into actually a business.
The best 50 board riders around the planet were all riding McCoy. The likes of Mark Richards, Wendy Botha, Cheyne Horan, Mark Warren, just to name a few. He was truly global. He had surf shops in Japan, the USA.
His surfboards were known all around the world. They were coveted by surfers all over the world. I was, very lucky to know him and to ride his boards back in those days, and to spend time in the factory.
Basically put some fantastic equipment under some of the best surfers in Australia's feet.
The first surf trips I went on were with Geoff and his team riders. I think the first one was to Victoria for the Allen Oak Memorial event. At the time I was about 13 years old, and there were 5 of us in Geoff's combi camper van. Geoff drove the whole way. We pretty much went non-stop except for petrol stops on the way to Phillip Island. Tony Wicker-Hardwick had the passenger seat. There were bucket seats in front. Tony had the passenger seat. He just got that. There was no correspondence entered into of who actually got that seat. There were 2 really good seats in the back of the car, which sort of folded back into the bed area. Mark Warren and Grant Dapper Oliver got that. I was the youngest guy on the trip. I actually got the absolute shit seat that was like right next to the little fridge in the combi, that had no padding and was like a square, and it faced backwards. So it was like a 20-hour trip from Sydney all the way to Phillip Island, sitting in the most uncomfortable seat that I've ever sat in my life. And it's funny that my first trip to Victoria and my first trip to Phillip Island, we did get really good surf. I think I made the final of the event, and from memory Ian Cairns may have won the event, but my strongest memory is like getting the shittiest seat in the combi and the 20-hour drive down there, and like getting out of the car, with just the sorest back of all time.
It wasn't until Mark was 18 and on the verge of going to win a world title. It was obvious to people around him anyway. And then Ray rang up one day and said, son, from your point of view, it's not good news, but the kid's got to do his own thing from here on in. I dropped dead on the end of the phone and got off. And then I had a partnership in a surf shop in Bondi Junction in Sydney. I rang the guy that ran that and I said, when I come down on Friday, can you get the hottest young surfer on the beach who's not attached to anybody? Cheyne Horan and Joe Engel, they both came. Well, Joe Engel stayed for a couple of years and then he moved from Bondi to Queensland and he got off the label, but Cheyne stayed for 37 years and we ended up with the longest running relationship of surfer shaper of all time. And that only ended a few years ago.
Surfing against Cheyne Horan, and there were two really sort of brutal competitive years where the lead seesawed between the two of us. And I was riding boards that I was shaping myself at the time, and Cheyne was riding Lazor Zaps. So.
The most advanced surfboard I ever made was the Lazor Zap. That was done it was done pre-81, and it had a wider tail, but and then in 81 I made a really wide tail, and they still get made today.
When Cheyne was surfing his pink and yellow with the black little V, checks or whatever they were, like late 70s, early 80s, I think that was the zenith of Geoff's design with those boards.
I know my equipment like the back of my hand. It's I know everything that I've got in my board to make it go fast, slow, turn in the pocket, hit the lip. Every bit of speed change, I know where it's coming from in the bottom of my board.
Those boards went insane. For single fins, Cheyne was matching what I was doing on a twin fin. The performance he was getting out of them was phenomenal, and those boards were really, really amazing. I think Cheyne had a pink wetsuit at the time. It was the boards and the wetsuit matched.
The original one, which was my godson, tracked it down and got it back. My ex-wife gave it away when I was overseas, and he paid $4,000 for it, and about a year later he got offered $15,000 for it, and he rang me up and said, what will I do? And I said, well, hang on to it if you don't need the money. And then the last offer he got, which was about 9 months ago, was $33,000. So I just wish I still owned it.
Design elements are forgotten about who introduced them and who really pioneered them. So I guess the great tragedies of the lineage of surfboard design is that Geoff probably hasn't received the accolades and the recognition that he definitely deserved for the development he did of the modern shortboard single fin, and also the introduction of twin fins into Australia. Geoff was on the, not on the cutting edge, he was leading the edge of surfboard design in those days. I would argue non-stop that, Geoff at the time was making the absolute best boards in Australia.
All I was doing was working hard to make a better surfboard, and all these guys, I had about 50 of the world's best surfers riding my boards at different time, and and that was a great advantage to me, because there was 50 people that are all way above average surfers, all requiring something a little different. So it gave me an amazing repertoire of how to regulate different things with a blank. I studied surfing and an object on a wave longer and harder than anyone else, than any 10 other people on the planet. I devoted my life to it, and a lot of personal things got whitewashed, marriages and all got whitewashed because I was so intense on trying to do what I was looking for.
I love catching a wave and the feel of the wave, but I understand how or why, and talking to Geoff is giving me that layer of understanding, and it's amazing. And then, you know, I used to just pick up and buy boards, but to talk to Geoff and understand the depth of his knowledge in shaping that has happened for over so many years, decades, nearly 6 decades, it's been enlightening for me, and it's just been a privilege to be involved with, and it's making me appreciate my surfing more.
Along the road, I got a lot of offers, and I started franchising the name to different people. I wasn't at the factory all the time, and then I thought I need to get a manager.
Geoff wasn't hands-on, that's why he brought the manager on board.
And after maybe 12 months, he actually ran off with a bundle of money. And so it finished the McCoy as it was.
He was devastated because we were brought up to be responsible for our actions and to pay our debts. And as a result of that, instead of declaring bankruptcy, Geoff decided that, well, it wasn't ever a question. He paid every cent back. He said he just could not do it to Dad and Granddad because it was his name. It's not like it was called, you know, Blue Sky, Sun Surfboards or something. It was McCoy, and it was our family name and our heritage, so it's very important.
So I thought about it for a while, and I thought, I'll just rebuild it. And then I thought, yeah, what, rebuild it? So some other bastard can come along and do the same thing? I thought, no, what I'll do is I'll scale it down and I'll only do what I can do. So I approached Barry Bennett and told him what was going on, and I said, do you reckon you could give me 10 blanks just to get started again? And he said, yeah, but you'll have to, if you get another 10, you're going to have to pay for the 5 of the original ones and slowly pay it off. Well, I did all that.
And then he moved down to Coffs Harbour to Emerald Beach, took a shed at Woolgoolga and started up McCoy again.
And then it just, we just got more individual, got back to my own label all the time, made enough money to survive on. And I reckon in the last few years, I make as much money as when I had 25 people working for me.
The McCoy logo is absolutely iconic in surfing. It's been the same for 50 years, and it's a testament of quality and great surfing.
Geoff and McCoy are fair income Australian icons.
Haven't done publicity for years, but the name is still strong around the world of surfing.
People phone and often they'll fill in an online order form, okay? And then there are more questions. They haven't put down everything they need to know. And so Geoff will call them up and he'll say, hi, it's Geoff McCoy here. I'm just ringing up. I've read your order form. I want to know this and that. And a lot of times people can hardly speak to him. They can't believe that Geoff is on the line. And we laugh about it because he's just a regular person who's passionate about what he does.
So I had the pleasure of Geoff coming. Geoff's down the road in Byron Bay, and had the pleasure of Geoff coming and visiting me and Surfing Australia here at our High Performance Centre, and took him for a tour around the centre and showed him what high performance surfing looks like in Australia today. And of course we have all the boards on display, and walked through and looked at those together, and we talked about surfboard design, and he certainly knows. He's probably forgotten more about surfboard design than I know, and he's a legend of our sport.
I got an email from Geoff, and Geoff said, I've been talking to my sister and she wondered if you could help me relaunch my brand. And I just thought that was such a bizarre, out of the blue thing that happened to me, because I'm probably one of Australia's worst surfers, but I have an incredible passion for surfing, and Geoff's contribution to surfing over so many decades, and where he's taken his boards right from the start in the early 70s, late 60s to where they are now. It was an incredible privilege. So I've been honoured to take part in Geoff's journey.
The surfing demographic now, it's moving away from the smaller shredding type surfer that's really appealing to young people because they're much more athletic. But the average surfer can't ride those boards, and we find that out every day. We get emails from people saying, look, I borrowed my mate's board and now I can surf, please make me a board. And so I see the future as being very strong for McCoy.
I believe the surfboards I produce under the McCoy label are the highest quality available in Australia, if not the world. And that's what I've always strived to do, because reverting back to Ray Richards, when I was only a grommet, and he said to me, son, if you make good surfboards, they will beat a path to your door forever. And I never forgot that, and he was dead right. And they're still coming to get boards, and I haven't even got any exposure really.
He deserves to be, I can't think of the right word, but held in the highest light or the greatest esteem for his shaping ability and his contributions to high-performance surfboard design in this country and worldwide.
I'm Geoff McCoy, and this is part of my story.